Every cell in your body right now is doing something that our best engineers, with billions of dollars in funding and machines cooled to near absolute zero, still cannot fully replicate. Something that should not be possible in the warm, wet, messy chaos of a living body. Something so far beyond what we thought biology was capable of that when scientists first proposed it, colleagues laughed them out of the room. But a study published in one of the world's most respected scientific journals has now confirmed what a growing number of physicists have quietly suspected for years: that life itself has been running a quantum computer this entire time, and we only just figured it out. Let's start with what that actually means, because the word quantum gets thrown around so loosely that it has almost lost its impact. Quantum mechanics is not a synonym for mysterious or unexplained. It is a precise, rigorously tested branch of physics that describes how matter and energy behave at the subatomic scale. And at that scale, reality operates by rules that make no intuitive sense whatsoever. Particles can exist in two states simultaneously, a phenomenon called superposition. They can be linked across space in ways where affecting one instantly affects the other, that is entanglement. They can pass through barriers that classical physics says they should be completely stopped by, that is tunneling. These are not theoretical curiosities. They are experimentally confirmed facts about how the universe works at its most fundamental level. The problem has always been that quantum effects are extraordinarily fragile. They require isolation from the environment. They are disrupted by heat, by vibration, by any kind of interaction with the surrounding world. They survive in laboratories only when systems are cooled to temperatures approaching absolute zero, colder than deep space. The idea that quantum effects could survive inside a warm, noisy, salty biological cell seemed to most physicists completely absurd. Life, they assumed, was a purely classical machine. Chemistry, not quantum physics. Molecules bumping into each other through random thermal motion. Signals traveling through neurons like electricity through copper wire. Slow, inefficient, classical. That assumption, it turns out, was catastrophically wrong. The story of how scientists figured this out starts not in a modern laboratory, but in the leaves of a plant somewhere around 2007, when researchers at the University of California, Berkeley, did something that would quietly change science forever. They shone an ultra-short laser pulse at the photosynthetic proteins inside green plant cells, the molecular machinery that captures sunlight and converts it into chemical energy. What they expected to see was a gradual, somewhat chaotic process of energy transfer, the kind of stumbling molecular relay race that classical chemistry would predict. What they actually observed was something that made them stop and look at their equipment twice. The energy was moving through the protein with near-perfect efficiency, finding the optimal pathway through what should have been an impossibly complex molecular landscape almost instantaneously. And the signature it left behind was unmistakable to anyone trained in quantum optics. It was quantum coherence. The energy was not choosing one path and following it. It was exploring multiple paths simultaneously, like a quantum particle in superposition, and collapsing onto the most efficient one. And that was just the beginning. Around the same time, researchers were staring in disbelief at plant proteins. Ornithologists were wrestling with a different mystery that had bothered them for decades. How does a European robin, weighing less than a bag of sugar, navigate thousands of miles across continents with an accuracy that would embarrass a professional pilot? The bird has no GPS, no star charts it consciously reads, no map. And yet it arrives at the same location year after year with extraordinary precision, detecting and orienting to the Earth's magnetic field in ways that classical biology simply could not explain. The answer, when it finally emerged, was equally astonishing. Deep in the eyes of migratory birds, in proteins called cryptochromes, incoming photons trigger a chemical reaction that produces pairs of electrons in a quantum-entangled state. The Earth's magnetic field subtly influences the quantum spin of those entangled electrons, and the bird's nervous system translates that quantum-level signal into directional information. A migratory bird is using quantum entanglement as a compass. It is, at the subatomic level, running an entanglement-based sensing device that our most advanced quantum laboratories only recently learned to build artificially. The bird figured it out hundreds of millions of years ago. Then there are the enzymes, proteins inside your body right now that are catalyzing thousands of chemical reactions every second, keeping you alive. Enzymes need to move hydrogen atoms from one molecule to another, and classically, this should be a rate-limited process, constrained by the thermal energy available at body temperature. Except that when researchers measured the actual speed at which enzymes catalyze certain reactions, they found them happening far faster than classical physics permits. The explanation? Quantum tunneling. The hydrogen atoms are not climbing over the energy barrier between molecules. They are tunneling through it, exploiting the quantum mechanical wave-like nature of matter to pass through obstacles that classically they should be stopped by. Your digestion, your respiration, your DNA repair machinery, processes fundamental to keeping you alive at every moment, are all being accelerated by quantum tunneling. Without it, These reactions would happen too slowly to sustain life. Your body is not just vaguely biological. It is, in part, a quantum machine that has been running since before you were born. But all of this, the photosynthesis, the bird navigation, the enzymatic tunneling, was just the prologue to what researchers at Howard University's Quantum Biology Laboratory published in the journal Science Advances in 2025. Because what physicist Philip Kurian and his team discovered takes everything science knew about quantum biology and multiplies it by something almost incomprehensible. They found that living cells, not just neurons, not just specialized sensory organs, but ordinary cells throughout the body, may be processing information using a quantum phenomenon called superradiance at speeds that make our most powerful quantum computers look like abacuses. Here's what superradiance is and why it matters. Normally, when a group of atoms or molecules absorbs energy and then releases it, they each emit independently at their own pace, like members of a crowd all coughing separately. Superradiance happens when those molecules synchronize, when they lock into quantum coherence with each other and emit energy together as a unified quantum system. The result is a burst of energy so much more intense and precisely timed than individual emission that it is qualitatively different in nature. It is a collective quantum behavior, requiring the kind of quantum coordination that engineers working on quantum computers work extremely hard to achieve and usually only manage at temperatures approaching absolute zero in isolated systems for fractions of a second. Kurian's group found it happening in protein filaments inside living cells, in warm, wet, room temperature biological tissue, mediated by an amino acid called tryptophan. Tryptophan is not exotic. You have heard of it. It is in the turkey. At Thanksgiving, it is the molecule people wrongly blame for post-meal sleepiness. But inside your cells, tryptophan is doing something far more remarkable than making you drowsy. Networks of tryptophan molecules form in cellular structures called microtubules, the internal scaffolding of the cell, and in other protein filaments called amyloid fibrils. These networks, Kurian's group discovered, behave as quantum fiber optics, channeling photons between molecules with a coherence that preserves quantum information across distances and timescales that should, by every prior assumption about warm biological systems, be impossible. And when these networks enter a superradiant state, the information processing speed they achieve is approximately 10 trillion operations per second. Not 10 million, not 10 billion, 10 trillion. That is more than 1 billion times faster than the signal speed of a conventional neuron. And Kurian's calculations showed that these superradiant protein fibers approach within 2 orders of magnitude of the Margulis-Levitin bound, which is the theoretical quantum speed limit, the absolute maximum rate at which any physical system can process information derived from the most fundamental laws of physics. Your cells are not just doing quantum computing. They are doing it close to the fastest speed that the laws of the universe permit. Let that sink in for a moment. Our best quantum computers, built by the largest technology companies on Earth, operate in facilities that look like the inside of a spacecraft, cooled to temperatures colder than outer space, shielded from every possible environmental interference, require enormous engineering effort just to maintain quantum coherence for microseconds at a time. They are extraordinary achievements, and yet a cell in your fingertip, a cell doing this in a warm, chemically chaotic, vibrating, temperature-fluctuating biological environment, appears to be performing quantum information processing at speeds that our engineered machines cannot approach. Not because our engineers are not clever enough, but because life, after 4 billion years of evolution, solved the quantum coherence problem in a way that we are only beginning to understand. What makes Kurian's 2025 paper especially significant is the scale at which he framed the implications. Using only 3 foundational assumptions, standard quantum mechanics, the universal speed limit set by light, and the matter-energy density of the observable universe, he calculated an upper bound on how much total information carbon-based life on Earth could have processed across the entire history of our planet. The number he arrived at is 10 to the power of 60 logical operations. And he found that this number approaches a comparable limit for all the matter in the observable universe. In other words, the total computational capacity of all life that has ever existed on Earth may be in the same ballpark as the computational capacity of the entire cosmos. Life is not a passenger in the universe, running its quiet biochemical reactions in a tiny corner of a vast cosmic machine. Life, operating quantum mechanically, may be one of the most computationally powerful processes in existence. This raises a question that scientists are now starting to ask with increasing urgency. If neurons are not the whole story, if the quantum computation is happening at the level of individual protein filaments inside cells, then what does that mean for our understanding of consciousness? For decades, the dominant model of brain computation has been based on the neuron, the assumption that thought, perception, memory, and awareness emerge from the pattern of electrochemical signals passing between nerve cells. But neurons are large, slow, and classical by the standards Kurian's work implies. Kurian's eye. If cells throughout the nervous system are processing information quantum mechanically at 10 trillion operations per second, And if the neurons themselves are only the visible upper layer of a much deeper quantum computational substrate, then our entire model of what a brain is and how it generates experience may be missing most of the picture. This is not fringe speculation. It is a legitimate open question in neuroscience and quantum physics that Kurian's work makes considerably harder to dismiss. And the implications extend beyond Earth entirely. Tryptophan, the key molecule enabling quantum superradiance in living cells, has been detected in interstellar space. It is not exotic or rare. It forms in the molecular clouds between stars, carried by light and chemistry through the cosmos long before any planet forms to host it. If quantum superradiance is a fundamental property of tryptophan-rich protein structures, if this is not a peculiar accident of Earth life, but a consequence of the underlying physics of how these molecules interact, then wherever biology emerges in the universe, it may emerge as a quantum information processor. The search for extraterrestrial life has mostly asked where conditions are right for chemistry. Kurian's work suggests the question may need to be reframed. Where in the cosmos are conditions right for quantum biology? And that is a significantly different and more expansive question. Now, it is important to be honest about where the science stands, because this is a field where extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and where the debate among physicists remains active and sometimes sharp. The original demonstrations of quantum coherence and photosynthesis were controversial when they first appeared, and subsequent research has refined the picture considerably. Some physicists argue that what looks like functional quantum coherence in biological systems is better explained as quantum-assisted classical processes, that nature exploits quantum effects at the margins, without truly performing quantum computation in the engineered sense. Others point out that the warm, wet environment of a cell generates thermal noise that should decohere quantum states too rapidly for them to be computationally useful. These are legitimate concerns raised by serious researchers, and they deserve serious engagement. What has shifted in recent years is the weight of experimental evidence. The 2024 experimental confirmation of single-photon superradiance in biological protein filaments, the work that Kurian's 2025 theoretical paper builds upon, was not a model or a simulation. It was a direct observation of a quantum phenomenon in a living biological structure, under physiological conditions, at room temperature. The skeptics must now account for that observation. And accounting for it has proven difficult within the framework of purely classical biology. The deeper philosophical implication of all this is something that physicists rarely say out loud, but that this body of research makes increasingly difficult to avoid. We have spent several centuries building a picture of nature as fundamentally mechanical, as a clockwork of molecules following deterministic or probabilistic classical rules, with quantum effects confined to the subatomic basement of reality, too fragile and too small to matter at biological scales. That picture produced tremendous science. It gave us germ theory and genetics and neuroscience and modern medicine. It was not wrong so much as incomplete. What quantum biology is revealing, piece by piece, experiment by experiment, is that the boundary between the quantum world and the living world is not a wall. It is permeable. Life did not evolve despite quantum mechanics. Life evolved through quantum mechanics. It found ways to harness superposition and tunneling and entanglement and superradiance, not as exotic exceptions to its operation, but as core features of it. Life is quantum all the way down. Think about what this means for how we design technology. Every quantum computer built today operates on principles discovered by studying nature. Entanglement, superposition, coherence, these were found in physics labs, but they exist in biology. Researchers are now running the process in reverse, studying how living systems maintain quantum coherence in warm environments, and building quantum devices inspired by what they find. Photosynthesis has already inspired new approaches to solar cell design. The bird's quantum compass has inspired new sensing technologies. The superradiance found in tryptophan networks is now being studied as a blueprint for quantum computing architectures that could operate at room temperature, which would be one of the most transformative engineering breakthroughs in human history. The machine we are trying to build was already built by evolution, and it has been running inside us for hundreds of millions of years. And then there is what this means for medicine. If quantum coherence in cellular protein structures is not just a curiosity, but a functional part of how cells process information, then disruptions to quantum coherence may contribute to disease. Kurian's group has already suggested that the quantum superradiance they observed in microtubules may be related to the cell's ability to protect itself from the kind of protein misfolding that characterizes neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. The amyloid fibrils that accumulate in Alzheimer's brains, long seen primarily as physical obstructions, may also represent a disruption of quantum information processing at the cellular level. If that connection holds up under further research, it would open an entirely new therapeutic dimension to our understanding of one of the most devastating and treatment-resistant diseases in medicine, The quantum computer inside the cell may be both what makes healthy brains work and what fails when they don't. What is perhaps most remarkable about all of this is how long it was right in front of us. The leaf performing quantum tricks in sunlight. The bird threading itself across a continent on invisible quantum threads. The enzyme in your stomach tunneling hydrogen atoms through energy walls at this very moment. The protein scaffold inside your cells pulsing with quantum light at 10 trillion operations per second. None of this is new. The biology has been doing it since long before there were scientists to observe it. What is new is our ability to see it, measure it, and begin to comprehend what it means. Life did not solve the problem of quantum computing. Life invented the problem of quantum computing 3 billion years before the first physicist wrote the first equation. Every living thing on Earth, every bacterium in the soil, every fungus threading its mycelium through the forest floor, every plant tilting its leaves to catch the sun, every bird threading through magnetic lines invisible to any other sense, every neuron in your brain firing its signal, is part of a quantum computational process of a scale and sophistication that our most advanced technology is only beginning to approach from the other side. We are not building quantum computers that imitate life. We are discovering that life is the quantum computer, and we are just starting to learn how to read its code.